one thing that I love talking about, right? It's trust, but trust, you have a few different aspects of trust. There's the basic level of trust where it's like, hey, come and do this job, and I trust you as the employer to do the job, and you trust me as the employee or the team member to pay you. But then there's this idea of trust as it pertains to really empowerment. And so I start with looking at empowerment, but then I back it up. How do I truly empower somebody? I can't really empower you if you don't have the skills that are needed to go and do whatever it is I say I've empowered you to do. So I've got to provide you with training. It has to be a trusted training. It has to be training that's validated. So we start with, do we validate that the training works? That's number one. Then from there, do we validate that the actual person that I'm training, that they understand the training? And the challenge in that, what happens often is people will say, well, we have a good training program, but we don't have a way to validate that people can actually receive and understand the training. And then in that training program, if you don't have psychological safety built in, then you don't make room and you don't make space for someone to say, hey, I don't fully understand what's going on. Can you explain that again? So you can see that this is a huge piece, but it's foundational. And then from the training, we have to move to the processes. Once again, your standard operating procedures, your checklists, and other elements of processes, those have to be validated. We have to make sure that they work. We have to make sure that they support the training. And then we have to make sure that the person, the team member, that they understand it. And we have to have the ability to validate their training, that they understand it. We have to validate that they know how to leverage the checklist that supports the training. And only then can I say you're now empowered. And so at the airlines, in the airline world and flying airplane world, when you show up, you never ask, you never question, what is that person in that flight deck, that cockpit, what is their capabilities? You don't ask, are they good enough? How many hours do they have? You trust that we've already done that. That's your side as a consumer and as a passenger. On the company side, they have a lot at stake. They have hundreds of millions of dollars of equipment each time an airplane pulls out of the chocks. And then you have lives at stake and you have everything else that comes with that. How do we get there? Training, validate it. Validate that I understand the training process. Validate that it's good. Validate that I understand it. We do that through utilizing simulations. We do real-time, real-world simulators. We do that through annual training. We do that through quarterly training. And we're constantly looking, can we improve the checklist? How do I make it more effective? How do I make it more efficient? Does it make sense? Can I improve the training? I don't want to just shorten and condense the training just for the sake of saving money. I want to make sure it's still effective because you as the passenger, you would like it if I shortened it to save money, but it made me dangerous under the guise that we save money and we're empowering people. So we have to make sure all those things are in place, but it's only once you have the training, the process, that I can then go, hey, you've been empowered to go and do the mission. So that's the foundation of what I'm actually talking about when I'm discussing trust and leadership and psychological safety, organizational culture, because all of these things, they go together.
Now, Jason, how would you bring that perspective into an organization or in a company that, or in an industry that is probably changing in every other quarter or so, and they're like, you know what, Jason, that works great in that industry because that industry has been built around really not taking that much risk, but to win in this industry, we need to stay a step ahead of where our competitors are going.
Sure.
How would we navigate that comfort level of trying new things, but also empowering and training the current employee base and the future employee base?
So what we see a lot is that people that are innovative organizations, they're moving at the speed of heat and they're moving at the speed of light. And they go, we don't have time to do that. And the other thing that they say is we can't afford to do that. And what I like to say is that in that case, you have to, number one, stop and say, am I stepping over the dollar for a dime? And then it's like professional athletes. Professional athletes, if you go and talk to some of the most experienced professional athletes and even some of the most experienced professional pilots, airshow pilots, fighter pilots, they'll tell you one of the most effective things that you have to be good at to be great in that arena is the basics. So if we don't start with the basics, training and process, it doesn't matter how fast we innovate, because what'll happen is we'll miss steps in between. And so while I give a lot of respect to innovative organizations, My challenge to those innovative, fast-moving environments, fast-moving, innovative organizations is, are you just being innovative and fast for the sake of being innovative and fast? Or did you actually, before you innovated, did you have a solid foundation? What I look at when I talk about that is special operations organizations. Most people think that people that are operating in special operations, they think that they're cowboys. They go, they're crazy. They do all kind of outlandish things. What we have to understand is when I was in special operations, I could try things in the airplane. I could push the airplane to its absolute limits only because I had a foundation of understanding the basics. And once I've built that foundation up and gotten comfortable with that, comfortable with the training, comfortable with the processes, that empowerment to also empower myself and know myself, it's only then can I go, you know what? Now we're going to incrementally push the boundaries. Cool, we've incrementally pushed the boundaries a few different times. We understand where the limitations are at. Now let's build safe parameters to then know we can go a little bit further. And then we can innovate. Wow, we figured out a new way to do this. Hey, we figured out how to fly the airplane differently. We figured out how to manipulate the battle space, the airplane differently and in an innovative way that no one else is thinking about. But they didn't have the ability to push the boundaries incrementally, to also set parameters and to also fully understand and appreciate the basics.
I love that. It goes back to that saying that, if you want to move fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go together.
Absolutely.
And at the core of your work is, how do we empower an organization for all of us to go together? So if we want to be not only adjusted to the speed that the world is moving into, us having those foundational building blocks and bringing others along, because that's the other thing too, right? You're always bringing in new employees into the organization. So with that said, Jason, so as I built my basics of how my foundation's built in, what are some of the challenges you see in organizations to bring in those new employees that are saying, hey, you know what, I have a new perspective I want to share. I know just this is great, this has worked out, but we also want to add our perspective into this work. How do we also give them that voice for them to, maybe the right word is to challenge the foundations, but to explore and navigate those challenges in a way that they still feel included and heard?
I love the question. One of the things that I love to talk about is that people want to be heard, they want to be understood, they want to be acknowledged. And then from a leadership perspective, team members expect us to not only hear, understand, acknowledge them, but they expect us to take action. Now, when you bring new people into an organization and they're excited, they got good ideas, they're the good idea fairy, that's awesome only once they understand what we do in this organization. See, when I entered into special operations, I had to come in and go, wait a minute, I knew how to fly this platform. I knew how to operate in this context and in this kind of space, in this arena. So while I might see something that I think is innovative or I want to add something to it, I'm not ready yet because I haven't fully assessed my environment. When I go into a new environment, I have to take the time to fully assess it. And so we have to have the capability to train people to understand how to assess the environment. And then we have to put parameters on their inputs. I'm happy to hear your input as a new person. I'm happy to hear the innovation, but I need to also meet them where they're at and go, hey, let me explain why that's a great idea, but it can't work right now. And maybe not a no, but maybe a not right now. Hey, why don't you spend a few more months understanding how we operate? Why don't you spend a few more months with the training, fully get the training, fully understand how our processes are within this organization. And then once you get that and you understand the lay of the land, or the battle space as we call it, then I'd love to have a conversation about what you think might be innovative, what you think we can do differently and why, and we can have a dialogue. The challenge is often we don't have a dialogue about it. It's just one person saying, I got a good idea, and the other person said, no, or, hey, let's try it. And then we realized that there was someone else in the organization that knew more than that person knew, and they understood why we could not do that or why we could not do it that way. Yeah. And so if you don't have communication, if you don't have dialogue in the organization, then you're going to miss the opportunity to, one, receive the information the right way, but then also create the space to meet people where they're at, to help them understand that they have to take time to assess the environment.
It reminds me of this this role that I had in corporate America that required me to, bring these recommendations to our senior executives and say, hey, you know what, I think we should be spending capital in this area versus this other area, and this is how we'll expand, or this is how we'll meet some of the business needs. And I remember my first 2 times I was coming in to speak to these executives after this research projects and all this other work that I was doing. And I would come with, the best practice was like come with 3 different proposals and what your recommendation would be based on all your research. And so I would come in and it would say, this is proposal A, B, and C. And my recommendation, Eric's recommendation is option B. And the executive would say, thank you so much. I'm going to take option A. And we're going to move on with that. Okay. And then I come in with my next project. And again, A, B, and C. And Eric's proposal is option C. And this is why. And this is all the data behind it. Well, thank you, Eric. We're going to go with option B now. So twice I go in there like, man, I'm horrible at this job. Like I come in with all this research. I'm backing it all up. I feel like I know the business. And I give them my proposals. And they completely went the other way. And so I remember talking to my manager about it and say, I think I'm horrible at this job. I don't think I'm good at this. I said, what do you mean? And I was like, yeah, they didn't take my proposal. I said, Eric, but they made a decision. And your job was to help them make a decision because they probably knew something else about the business in a different perspective, or that they have some more insight on, and you eventually grow into that insight, right? But if you would have came in and would have done all this research and everything, and they would have not been able to make any decision at all, then that's where you're not doing, you weren't properly equipped to do that particular proposal or that particular job. And that kind of just completely started giving me an expanded perspective on, how do we work with senior leaders that are making sometimes multi-million-dollar decisions around where we're taking the company, where we're taking employees, the safety of certain products or what have you, right? How do we equip them with the right information from them to make decisions? Because that's how empowerment also looks like as well.
Absolutely. There's the decision loop, right? And so when you look at the decision loop, it's number one, how do we shorten the decision loop if we can? And how do we go through the decision loop as quickly as we can? And there was a Harvard Business Review article and it talked about 3 different types of leadership models. And they showed the statistics on the ones that succeeded the most and the ones that failed the most. And a lot of them were in the startup space. So the one method is the leader says, come on in and present everything and get everybody around the table. And it was more performative because the leader had already determined what they were going to do. So it was performative. And then the second one was no one could make a decision. Oh my God, we're at a standstill because we have all this information, but the leader can't make a decision. And then the third one that was the most effective one was when the leader would say, hey, bring me all the data, option A, option B, option C. Cool, thanks for the presentation. Thanks for giving me the information. And now, based on your inputs, we'll talk a little bit about it. We'll have some dialogue. But this is the decision that we're going to move forward with. That type of leader had the most success.
Wow.
And so, to your point, there has to be information. There has to be a flow of information. And as a commander, when I was leading an organization in the military, one of the things that I had to learn was how to help my people to understand that I heard them, understood them, and acknowledged them. And at times I could say, look, I heard what you said, but I have to make a decision. And in making that decision, there's information that I'm aware of that I can't share with you. It's timely or it's classified. And then there were other situations where I had to make a decision. I would tell my folks, hey, I made this decision. You brought me some information. You gave me some data points that I needed. I made a decision, and this is why. By the way, this is what I can tell you. This is what you need to know. And for next time, think about this and this and this. And they go, oh, thank you, because now I know how to better provide you information as a commander to make a decision. But if we aren't communicating to people a bit about how we're making the decisions and why we're making the decisions that we're making, then we do walk back thinking that the information we provided wasn't good enough. And we need to make certain that our people, especially our people that are good at what they do, we need to make sure that they're valued, that they know that they're bringing value. Because when people stop feeling like they are valued and like they are not bringing value, because we all want to be loved, we all want to be valued. When they stop feeling that love, when they stop feeling that value, and I'm not talking coddling, then they will leave and go to another organization. Because we all want to feel valued in some way. We want to feel like we're making a contribution to the organization.
Yeah. Jason, what is your perspective, especially with your background around succession planning, right? So one of the insights that I remember having a conversation with a sponsor of mine, was, when I was going and taking some new roles, one of the first questions they always asked me, hey, have you taken a new role? Who are you preparing behind you? Right? Because sometimes your ability to grow into new potential roles might be limited by who's coming in to take your current role. How did you navigate, or what have you seen some of the best practices to navigate not only one's own personal growth into leadership, but how we're bringing others along into their growth path as well?
So great question. I've seen more bad examples than good examples. And I've read a lot about succession planning and things that we should be thinking about. Number one, again, organizational culture. If we have a culture where I'm afraid that if I teach you too much that you're going to take my job, then we have a foundational issue within our organization, the culture. Let's start with that. So let's say we've gotten past that. Then from an organizational planning, organizational succession planning, we need to be thinking not just a year ahead, not just 5 years ahead. We need to be thinking more long-term and strategically about who's where, why they are there, and how they are going to get the skills, the knowledge to get to that next role. No one is ready for the job before they get it, because there's a lot of things that happen in the job that you can't learn from afar and you can't learn in a different position. But I need to be able to look out as a leader, and I need to be able to spot the talent. And then I need to figure out, how do I groom the talent? How do I get them educated in what they need to know? There's sponsorship, there's mentorship, and there's coaching. Those three things are extremely different. And if I'm going to sponsor someone, how do I make sure that they're equipped with the right coaching and that they're equipped with the right mentoring? So that when we're talking succession planning, each person that's in a leadership role, they should be mentoring people. Each person in a leadership role, they should be occasionally coaching people, and they should be figuring out how do they help prepare those future leaders in the company. And if you're really good in your job, then your concern is not who's going to take your job. Your concern is more who's going to replace you when you go off to greener pastures, because you're good and you want to have somebody to come behind you. Because the last thing and the worst thing we can do in an organization is to allow that position to become like a vacuum and to be a vacancy where we have to fill it, and we fill it with someone who isn't even close to prepared to step in to the position of learning. So that's why mentoring is so powerful. That's why it's so important that we're identifying our talent. But if we don't ever come out of our ivory towers, if we don't ever come out of our offices to actually connect with people, to communicate with people, to meet them where they're at, to understand what they do. The example that I love to give is when they do recruiting for a football team, they'll bring in several quarterbacks. Typically on a football team, you're only going to have 3, maybe 4 max quarterbacks. But that first season of freshman quarterbacks, you're probably getting 5 to 10. Well, what do you do with the other quarterbacks? You find out where they're better positioned at. You know what? You're a good quarterback, but you would be much better as a wide receiver. Hey, you would be much better as a safety. And then we find the best talent for those 3 quarterback slots. In the business world, how do we do that? You've got a lot of people that are out there. They're hired on that job position. They're hired on everything about that job description and position. But how many times do we actually get to them, have a conversation, and go, well, what are you really passionate about? What really excites you? Well, tell me more about your background, not just what's on your resume, not just what's on your CV, not just the job that you do. And when we do that, then all of a sudden we go, wait a minute, you would be a really good fit over here. Hey, would you mind doing this special project? We have ways that we can really bring out that talent and find out what they're good at. And now all of a sudden we figure out how do we properly place people in the right roles and level of responsibility. And oftentimes when you actually start digging into this, we have people that need to come down a notch on responsibility because they've got too much. They need to change roles. Some people need to actually shift roles to a lower role. And then we have people that they are just smoking the competition and no one knows. So we need to elevate their level of responsibility. We need to elevate their role to a different role so that they can be properly placed with their role and their responsibility. But you can't figure this out and you can't have a proper succession planning if you aren't consciously and intentionally looking for the talent that's already in your organization.
And Jason, how would you work? I mean, you've worked with clients of all different sizes. How would you encourage companies that are multinational and spread out through all these geographies and that maybe, certain executives know of some other organizations, but aren't in tune with the up and coming talent in a particular geography, in a particular region, or a particular product group, for example, because maybe historically or some form of fashion, we've created those silos in these companies. How would you recommend for these companies that say, that works great, but I have my organization here, and this other person's organization is in charge of another P&L, and they have their own talent. How would you encourage them to kind of, collaborate across and identify those talents? What have you seen that's been some best practices for that?
What I've seen is where those senior leaders are having the conversations. The senior leaders have to be willing to come to the table and go, hey, who's your top 2-3 people? Tell me why. Why are they good? Hey, would they be a good fit in my organization? Hey, you want to maybe do a swap?
Yeah.
Hey, can we do some career broadening? But the senior leaders, they control the silos, and they control who gets out of them, and they control who comes into them. And oftentimes what I've seen on the negative side of that conversation is you'll have someone that has a superstar, but they go, you're such a superstar, I don't ever want to let you go. So I'm going to clip your wings, keep you limited, and you're going to stay within this organization. And we forget that if we actually help them to spread their wings, not only will they make us in this silo, this organization look good, but they'll make the organization at large as a whole look even better. And that is an obligation of senior leaders. They've got to figure that out, and they've got to be unafraid to lose, and it's not even a loss. They've got to be unafraid to help their premium talent to fly and to soar. And when you do that, that's when you're actually working towards the future of making the organization better. That's when you're helping people to flourish, and that's, to me, where you're earning that title of leader.
Absolutely. It reminds me of this story. I was about a year into my new career in the tech sector, and I have an engineering background, so I was doing my engineering job. But I call it, at the end of my shift or what have you, I would go and do work in education. I would go and serve the community. I was doing workshops on the weekend. I was doing digital literacy in Spanish in the library, and my performance was not impacted at all, but my manager was seeing that I was doing all this volunteer work in the evenings and on the weekends. And he told me, he's like, in one of our one-on-ones, he said, Eric, what do you want to do? And I was like, what do you mean what I want to do? Like, I'm an engineer, and I'll move from this cubicle to that cubicle and maybe one more cubicle, and then I'll retire. Right? And then he's like, no, Eric, no, really, what do you want to do? Like, what problem do you want to go solve? Like, what do you care about? And I was like, I really like what I'm doing now. And he wasn't satisfied with that answer. And so he poked me again, maybe in our next one-on-one, because he knew there was something else, right? He's like, there's something else that we want to unlock. He asked me again. And I was like, I'm just going to answer it this time. I said, you know what? I think the world is moving at the rate that it's moving. Thanks to technology, we're in the midst of all this. And as I'm doing this work in education outside of this, I'm realizing there's a big gap. And I think if we want to continue to be relevant in the 21st century and moving technology along, we need to bring our communities along onto this as well and empower them and really transform education. And of course, Jason, I'm telling you right now, as soon as I finished that answer, I thought I was going to get fired. I was like, this is it. I'm just like, I'm not going to move my cubicle anymore. I'm done. And what he answered was true leadership. He answered me, he says, you know what? Then let's help you get there. He's like, from here on out, any job you get is a tool into your toolbox. Don't be enamored with your grade. Don't be enamored with your salary. Be enamored about building the tool into your toolbox. Because he had that 10-year, 15, 20-year vision. And now you structuring this perspective even makes me resonate even deeper now that brand that leader built, it wasn't just because he did that for me. He did it for so many others. Now he's not only a senior leader in that company, but also someone that's so admired and everyone's so grateful because the entire organization, the entire company is much better because not only he did not clip our wings, like you said, he helped us all fly. And that made the world of difference, not only in our careers. I'm to this day very grateful for everything that he did, but you're seeing this whole network of individuals around him of just saying, hey, thank you for lifting all us up, right? He didn't have that scarcity mindset. It was an abundance mindset.
And that's what's important. There has to be an abundance mindset with our people. And when we have that abundance mindset with our people, we give them that space to be creative. When we start that's where you find innovation in the creative space. And then we provide them with the access, the right tools, the right resources that they need to get the job done, that they need to become better. And oftentimes, those tools and resources, they already exist. We're already paying for them.
Yeah.
We just don't even realize that they're there, and we haven't told our people that they're there so that they can help them. The roles and responsibilities. Let me find out who you really are. Let me find out what you're really capable of. Let me find out what you're passionate about. And let me find out how to leverage those talents so that I can properly place you in the right role, the right level of responsibility. Help you, mentor you to understand, don't get excited about the grade, don't get excited about the pay, don't get excited about the position, but get excited about the learning, get excited about the growth. And then we have to go, well, what's the goal? What are your goals as an individual?
Yeah.
Let me share, now that you share with me your goals, let me now share my goal for you is to help develop you.
Yeah.
Let me share with you what my 1, 3, 5, 10-year goal is with you at this organization. And if you choose to go elsewhere, here's something that I would tell you to consider. You know, and then as we share those goals back and forth, then we say, okay, now let's create some opportunities to win along the way. How do I find an opportunity to give you that win that Eric needs to continue to be motivated, to continue to be excited, to continue to grow and push the boundaries? When you put that together, that's a recipe for success. That's where a leader is truly leading people. And that's where you really start developing the people. That's where you start building that succession plan. And people are dialed in to want to contribute to this organization, to want to be part of this organization, because they see the leader is committed to them. And they, in turn, the reciprocity concept, they, in turn, are committed to that leader. But if we don't start with that, then there's no reciprocity. There's no innovation. There's no creativity. And it all is surface level. So we've got to dial into the people, who they are, who they really are, and what they really want to do. And then we help guide them and show them a good way, a good direction, and put them on a path for success, to grow their wings, to fly higher, to fly faster, to fly farther together.
Yes, I love that. Jason, one quick question too on process, right? One of the things that we started this conversation was about how it was not only important understanding the process, understanding the principles of the process, but really being really well trained in the process. And the other thing too you said was we're also checking on that process, right? Checking in on that. What are some of the mechanisms that you've seen that organizations have successfully checked in on processes? Because sometimes processes could also be what folks blame to be, oh, this is why I can't innovate because I had to follow this particular steps. But instead, I just wasn't listening to the changes that were in my organization. So how are we, or what have you seen organizations do to make sure they're listening and staying up front so they could be empowered to tweak those processes?
I think it starts with, when we talk processes, it starts with the information flow. Do we have a flow of information in a way that we know people are going to get the information? Sometimes what happens is we say, well, we sent out an email, you didn't get it. No, do we have a way of checking that you got the email? Or do we have a way of making certain that you get it? Do we have a way of understanding that everybody learns in a different way? Some people want to read it, some people want to hear it, some people want to see it, and some people need all three or more, right? There's different styles of learning. So the information flow when it comes to processes has to be solid. And then from there, we have to be able to measure it. Are there ways that we can measure our process working? Because if you come to me and you says, look, the process doesn't work, and then I get to respond and say, well, tell me about how you leverage this process. You know, when I'm sitting in the airplane, part of my checklist, which is a process, is I have a flow. And I do certain things in a certain order, and as I do them, and then I come back and I go, cool, the checklist, yep, I got them all. But then what happens is you mess something up, and the first thing they'll want to ask, or that I would ask as an instructor, I would say, well, show me your flow. And then if you show me your flow and I go, wait, you went here first. You went down here to the gear handle first or to the brake. Why did you not go up here first? Because when you go in this order, we've designed the flow in a way that it's systematic and it's organized in a logical way. But if you start and go a different way and it doesn't make sense, now you might think that it works for you, but if I'm able to measure it, I go, wait a minute, when I checked your flow, it didn't match and therefore you missed something. And I've measured it and you missed it multiple times, or multiple people have tried it this way and it didn't work. Now I can measure the success of that process. A lot of times what's happening is we create processes, we don't train people on the process, We don't validate that they understand it, and then we don't come back to reinforce it. And by not reinforcing it, then we no longer are holding them accountable. We're not holding ourselves accountable, and no one follows it. And then they go, well, it just doesn't work. So, well, how are you getting the job done? We just have workarounds. So let me get this straight. You created a separate workaround process, and you negated the process. Well, let's talk about why you did a workaround. Let's talk about why you negated it. And we as an organization, we can't be afraid to have that tough conversation.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't work. Well, let's explain why it didn't work. Wait, well, thank you for pointing that out. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's fix that process. Yeah. So if we're not measuring it, if we're not assessing it, then we can't have a level of accountability to ensure that people are using it. To also have a level of accountability to determine when it's not working, to then improve it, to change it, to modify it. But if you don't have a way to assess it, then people will begin to just set it aside and negate it because they figure it doesn't work and it's obsolete, and it actually is creating more problems than not. Yeah. But we got to be willing to set ego and pride aside as an organization, ego and pride aside for the person who created this process. Say, look, this is not about the individual. This is about the process itself. This is about that checklist. This is about the organization. This is about safety. This is about everything that is required to make the operation run. So remove your feelings, remove your ego. Let's ask the tough question. Does it work? Does it not? Why does it not work? What should we stop? What should we start? What should we continue? So that we can constantly be tweaking and getting better. But let's also make sure that we don't change something just for the sake of saying we changed it.
Right. So Jason, today when you enter into an airplane, you probably have more tools, more measurements, more equipment than you did when you started off your career. With that said, we also are creating the ability to measure more precise steps that we're taking in how we're flying an airplane or even how we're managing our business. How do we differentiate the signal versus the noise in this era that is constantly being either monitored and measured with everything that's saying, yeah, this is where it's going, or this is really where it's going? How do you find the reality in this world that we have constant pings and digital tools around us?
When we look at all the tools that are around us, we look at all the inputs, we have to your point, we have to be able to separate the things that are necessary from the noise by deciding what's truly necessary. How do we break things down to understand what is absolutely essential? Without this, nothing happens. And then build on that. What's next? What do we need from there? And then as we build on it, then we go, wait a minute, well, when we put these lists together, we're like, you're gonna end up having this list, and all of a sudden you have, it's kind of like putting a table together or putting a toy or something together. You're like, you got all these extra pieces. Well, what do you do with them? Well, they were supposed to be used. Well, in this case, we look and we go, wait a minute, we have all this additional information. We have all of this noise. Well, the noise, we were able to separate that, as they say, the wheat from the chaff. Well, if we didn't use this and it doesn't matter and it's not a necessity, then let's get rid of it. But most people don't know how to start with narrowing down what is absolutely essential at the foundation. What are the basics? What's the foundation? Now, let's build this back up. And as we build it back up, only based off of what's necessary from each level, can we then identify the things that we don't need. But we have to be intentional. We can't use the excuse that we're moving so fast, technology is changing so quickly. You know, I've had tools in my toolbox, literal physical video tools, and I'm looking for the next thing, and all of a sudden I go back to this other box and I go, wait a minute, I had the right equipment all along, but I was moving so fast and I forgot the tool that I had in this box over here. Is there something new and better? Yes. Does this still work? Yes. Do I need the new and improved shiny thing to get the job done? Or can I do it with the existing thing? Well, you can do it with the existing thing. So then why did I go for the new and shinier thing? Once I narrowed that down, I was like, oh, okay, I don't need anything else. This is working. But if we don't take the time to be intentional and assess what is necessary foundationally, what is necessary at each level, at each step, then we're going to pile on all these things and we're going to just create noise. You know, and as you create the noise, now it gets harder and harder to focus on what you actually need. It's harder and harder to focus on getting the mission of the job done. So the funny thing is that I'll tell you the background, right? So that creativity, that access, the roles, responsibility, the goals, the opportunities, that's part of my high performance leadership framework.
Oh, okay.
So cargo, your people are your most precious cargo, and you have to provide them with the right cargo. So that's a framework, but that framework works from the leadership perspective, the leaders providing that, and that framework also works for the individual. Like, okay, wait a minute, what do I want to be? Who do I want to be? Where do I want to be? And how do I want to get there? Then I start as an individual. I start with creativity. Where's my creativity space at? What do I actually have access to right now? What tools and resources are available to me? What tools and resources do I need to go after? And then what is my current role? What's my current level of responsibility? What role do I want to have? What level of responsibility do I want to have in the future? What are my goals? What goals have I set? Why did I set them? How did I set them? How do I assess them? How do I assess if I'm actually winning with those goals? And then what are the opportunities to get some small wins for me as an individual, as a team member along the way? And then how do I help my team, or how do I help get the organization to help me get some of these wins along the way as well, right? So it's this framework that when you put it together, it's like, oh, wait, we can overlay that with innovation. We can overlay that with high performance teamwork. We can overlay that to leadership roles in any number of ways.
Yeah. That's cool. I think I have one final question. Let's play with the special ops thing. I think you hinted one that I thought was really cool. We could dive into a little bit more. Okay. So Jason, one of the things you shared with us earlier, right, was that, when you go into these special ops operations, it's not just improvised. You're not just like going in, we're going to go and cowboy up and figure this out. There's a sense of preparedness. There's a sense of, hey, we're training for this. We're going into this situation. But there's also a sense of unknown. You're also going into you're not 100% predicting success. You're creating a certain sense of comfort level for you to be prepared for this, but there is certain variables that you do not control and you do not know. In this world that's moving, and you're suggesting, hey, if we just build the foundational steps, that's what's going to equip us to navigate the unknown. What are some of the things that you're seeing organizations do successfully for them to go into like the special ops mode and say, you know what, I think I'm ready for this next step. I think I'm ready to go into a little bit more unknown. One, how they've been doing that successfully, but two, how do you know in a special ops situation, when you go into a situation and you know what, you need to step back. You need to step back and say, I thought I was going to be successful in this. It didn't work out. Everything worked out. I prepared as much as I could, but the variables were a little bit more challenging than I thought. I need to step my organization back. I need to step this operation back. Can you give us some examples of both those areas?
Absolutely. Number one, when you're talking about doing a mission, when you're talking about special operations missions, one of the major things that we start with is we do everything we can to remove ego and pride off the table. Because when you hit that wall, when you hit that constraint factor, when you hit that unknown, I need to have the level of comfort in that leader and whoever's leading that mission that they're not going to be so stuck on their ego and pride that they're like, no, we got to go do it and cost people their lives. I have to have the comfort factor that if I send them out, that person who's leading that mission and say, got it, this is where we stop, this is where we fall back, and we reassess, we regroup and we reassess. So that's critical on who leads the mission. The other thing that you have to understand about special operations environments is it's not the person who's leading is not necessarily the person who has the highest rank. It's not necessarily the person who has the most overall experience. It's really the person who is best suited for that mission. You got to think about it. You can put a team of 10 people together, and when you put this team together, each person is selected for this team because of their unique experience. And now when you put that unique experience together, then you figure out how do we help them to work together. And so if it's a certain type of mission, then I want the person who's best suited for that mission to lead that mission. If we have a ground team and an air team, and the air team actually is going to be out front, then there's a piece of that mission that the air team is going to lead. If it's a ground-directed mission, then that ground person is possibly going to lead that. If it's an explosive mission, the person who has explosive experience is going to lead it. That doesn't mean they've been on the team the longest. It doesn't mean they're the oldest person. Doesn't mean they're the smartest person overall, but they are very smart, very calculated for that one particular mission. And so that's how we're able to do that. But then the other piece is we do a lot of planning. We do a lot of briefing. We do a lot of assessing of everything that we know. Let's get as much information that we know. Let's comb through all the information we know. Let's assess the information. Let's solve for all the variables that we can solve for. And then let's create contingency plans for the variables that we don't know, that we can't account for. And then we start running through drills. We start running through exercises, and we start putting the plan together. And at times there's a piece of the plan over here that a group is doing. There's another piece over here that the group is doing, another piece over here, and another piece over here. I recall there was this one major mission. I won't tell you exactly what the mission was. It was televised and all this other stuff, so I can't get into that piece. But what we found out at the end, after the mission was completed, then our leadership, they came to us and they says, okay, here was the mission, here's what we had to do, and we're gonna show you what your role and your piece in this mission was, and we're gonna show you how it all flowed together.
Wow.
But there was strategy that started up here to go, great, this is what the mission is. Okay, I need this team over here, they're gonna do this piece. Then this team is gonna do this piece, and this team is gonna do this piece, and so forth. And what you realize is the other part of how we're able to do that is we have these execution checklists. And what it means is let's just say A through Z. You can't get to B unless you get through A. Now D you can do simultaneously with B, but you can't go on to E until C is done. So now we got A, B, C, and D done, and then we can go to E. And if we get to E, but we can't complete E, then we make a determination. There's these determining factors that we say, we're either gonna continue the mission or we're gonna say the mission's off, we can't continue the mission. But we've all briefed it. We all know where our stopping point is for each team. And we understand that we have to get our piece done. We understand that egos and prides can't get in the way of success, because that's actually what you cause failure at. That's where you get complacent at. And so because we have these different levels of understanding of what each team does, somebody at the top has an understanding of how the pieces of the puzzle work together. And then on each team, we have an understanding that we have to be willing to say, stop, no, we can't go any further because we've reached a limitation or we've hit a variable that we could not prepare for, and there is no second, third, fourth option to continue the mission. Now, oftentimes in special operations, we've thought about the various things. We've thought about the unknown, and so we go, okay, great, that happens. Here's the timeline that we have to make a decision. Can we create another option? Cool, bring the team back together. What's the option? Do we go? Does it make sense? Do we have at least an 80% solution? We're not trying to go into combat with a 100% solution, because that's almost impossible to do because of the unknown variables. But can I get to an 80% solution right now? If I get to that 80% solution, then cool, let's move out, because that's our second option when we hit this unknown. The next unknown, can I get to the 80% solution? Can I keep going? Yes. And then we continue to build. And we build these timelines in there. We build this execution checklist in there. And when you follow that, you don't let ego and pride get in the middle of that. That's where you find success. But you don't need to know the whole picture. Someone in a group of someone's, they have to understand the bigger picture. And they're looking, they're going, cool, that's done, boom. And you see it in the movies. Cool, that was done. All right, cool, next guy do. And literally, I found out that I flew this one trip for a couple of days. I flew this group of people around from one location to another location. And then they go, yeah, actually, you were taking this team up here to practice this part of the operation. Wow, mind blown. I had no idea. But if I didn't have the basics of flying the airplane, getting them in there without people knowing that we're there and knowing who they were, we couldn't have gotten the mission done. And imagine that would have pushed the mission back by a day, 2 days, a week, whatever the case may be. And then we possibly wouldn't have been able to execute that mission on that day that it was executed.
So if we step back, it's like I could look at or listen to my quarterly earnings for my company and maybe disagree with the certain parts of where the company might be going, but my ability to control and impact my company is within the work that I am responsible for.
100%. It's what you have to master your space. Right? You know, I talk about these 7 critical skill sets: professional knowledge, situational awareness, assertiveness, decision-making, communication, leadership, adaptability, and flexibility. For your specific job, for your specific space, you have to own that. Because without you doing your job, the next person can't do their job. It's a system of systems, and it's systems of trust all throughout the organization, right? And if we're not doing our piece and owning our space, then the next person can't execute the next step and this execution checklist to get us to the finish line. And oftentimes what people will say, and this is the one statement that I absolutely just can't stand to hear someone say this, is, oh, I'm just a fuel operator. Oh, I'm just a maintenance technician, or I'm just a communications technician, or I'm just. No, here's the thing. 2 points I'll make. In an airplane, I, as a pilot, often confused with the most important person on the airplane, which is absolutely incorrect. If I don't have that person that just puts fuel in the airplane, we don't go anywhere. It doesn't matter how good of a pilot I am. Without every single person that makes that airplane happen, the airplane will never get off the ground. And so that becomes very, very important that we understand that. And we understand that everyone has a role to play. So it's not just, I'm just this. The second point that I will make is an airplane engine. It costs tens of millions of dollars for just one single airplane engine. It's extremely complex. It has all of these pieces and parts to it. Do you know what? It takes one simple malfunction, a chip, or a displacement of one single fan blade in this massive multi-million-dollar engine, and it will take out the entire engine. It's a system of systems. It's the sum of the parts. It's the sum of the whole. But that one thing that's just a fan blade goes out, that whole engine is going to get out of balance. And then all of a sudden, the engine's going to catch on fire. It's going to shut down. And all kind of other catastrophic things are going to happen. The same thing in an organization. Every person has a role and a part to play. And it's our job as leaders to ensure that everyone understands that their role is invaluable and that they are a valued member of the team, and that without them, without the janitor keeping the place clean, without the food service team making certain that we have the proper nutrition, on and on and on, without every single person, every system of systems doing their job, doing their role, we can't get the overarching mission done. Productivity will go down. Our capital will begin to be utilized unnecessarily. Our profitability will begin to decrease, on and on and on. So every piece matters, every person matters, and no one is doing just a job. Everyone is doing an important job that is absolutely essential to make the engine run effectively.
Mic drop right there. Love that, Jason.
There we go.
Good job, bro. That was awesome. Hey, everyone. This is Eric, the host of the Future Human Experience. The reason why this podcast was created was to be a platform for others to really bring these conversations to life. So if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. It will really help our channel and expose these ideas for others. Thank you.